All right, welcome back to the Book Nook.
Always a pleasure to be back.
Glad to have you. And this time we're doing something a little different. Someone recommended a book to us, and
Oh, yeah.
it is Austin Kleon's Show Your Work: 10 Ways to Share Your Creativity and Get Discovered.
And
And
this is a great one.
I like it. I like it a lot. And knowing our audience, a lot of people listening are the kind of folks who are out there making things, doing things, being creative. But then there's that next step of, okay, how do we connect with other people?
Right. How do you actually get it out there?
Exactly, and that's what Kleon is tackling in this book. So in this deep dive, we're going to pull out those really immediately useful things.
The actionable steps.
Yes, things you can actually do, whether you're, looking for a complete career shift, trying to build a following around something you love,
Yeah.
or even just making your current work more visible.
Right. Making those connections.
Yeah, we're kind of moving past that idea of the lone genius toiling away in isolation.
The romantic myth.
Exactly, and getting into like the nitty-gritty of sharing your creative process.
Yeah. And I think what really struck me when I was reading this is Cleon's idea that it's not enough to just be good anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like the world has changed and people have to be able to find you and your work.
You have to be findable.
Exactly. Findability is key.
So let's jump right into some of those actionable steps because, he says you have to be findable.
Yeah.
So for someone listening right now, what would be that first step?
Well, I think it's about being open to sharing your process.
Oh, okay.
Not the finished product necessarily, but those little snippets, the behind the scenes,
Yeah.
the experiments, the works in progress.
Yeah, like don't wait for it to be perfect to share it.
Exactly.
Right. And Creon even mentions, there are creators he admires who are constantly putting little bits of their work out there online.
Yeah, leaving breadcrumbs.
Yeah, it's like this trail of breadcrumbs, and you can follow along and see how they do things.
And it kind of takes the pressure off, too.
Right.
Because you don't have to wait for that big reveal.
Right, you're inviting people into the process.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what makes it less scary for a lot of people.
Definitely. And you never know who you might connect with along the way,
That's true, too.
just by sharing those little snippets.
Absolutely. And it actually connects really well with this next idea, which is, embrace your inner amateur.
Oh, yeah.
Like, don't let the fear of not being a total expert or super polished hold you back from sharing.
That's huge.
Because it's the amateurs who are often more willing to experiment and try new things.
And they're doing it for the love of it.
Exactly. They're not jaded.
Right.
So what's something someone listening could do right now that embraces that amateur spirit?
Well, I think it's about identifying one thing that they're learning or are really passionate about
Okay.
and committing to sharing their progress on that journey, even if it's just baby steps.
Like even if they're just starting out.
Exactly. And Cleon actually reminds us of that great quote from Shunryu Suzuki. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities.
Oh, I love that.
It's so true.
And there's something really contagious about that beginner enthusiasm.
Absolutely.
Like when you see someone who's just so excited to be learning something new.
And sharing those struggles, those early challenges.
Exactly. And even experts can learn from that fresh perspective.
Right. It reminds you of that initial spark.
Absolutely. So how can someone take that beginner's mindset and make it more concrete in terms of sharing?
Well, Cleon talks a lot about documenting your process.
Yeah.
Making those invisible steps visible.
Yeah, turning it into something tangible.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So think of yourself as a documentarian of your own creative life.
So if someone's listening right now, what's one little thing they could do today to document their process?
It could be as simple as jotting down a quick note,
Okay.
taking a photo, snapping a quick audio thought.
Yeah, just capture a little piece of what you're working on.
Right. And Cleon actually quotes David Carr, who said that no one really cares about your resume.
Mm-hmm.
They want to see what you've made.
Right. It's the work that matters.
And that includes the journey.
Exactly. And documenting your process is a great way to capture that journey.
And, it's not just for showing other people.
Sure.
It's also incredibly helpful for your own growth.
Oh, how so?
Well, by making your process visible to yourself, you can start to see patterns,
Okay.
track your progress, uncover unexpected insights.
It's like a visual journal of your work.
Exactly.
Okay, so you're documenting your process. What's the next step?
Well, Cleon suggests turning that documentation into a regular habit
Okay, how do you do that?
with a daily dispatch.
A daily dispatch, what's that?
It's basically just finding one small, interesting piece of your process to share online every day.
Every single day?
Yeah, keep it current.
So like a little glimpse into what you're working on.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be this big announcement.
Right.
Just a little something to keep people in the loop.
And what would be a good platform for that?
Well, it really depends on where you feel most comfortable.
Okay.
But Cleon actually mentions that Z. Frank, when he was hiring people, was often more interested in what they were doing in their free time
Really?
than their formal portfolio.
Interesting.
So that daily dispatch gives people a glimpse into that.
Yeah, into what you're actually interested in. It
Exactly.
makes you more human.
Right. It creates that connection.
Okay, so you're sharing daily now. How do you think more strategically about this whole process?
Well, Cleon introduces this concept of stock and flow.
Stock and flow. What's that?
So your flow is that daily stream of updates,
Okay.
and your stock is the more lasting, substantial pieces you create.
Okay, so like the finished products.
Exactly, like books, articles, albums, things like that.
And what's the relationship between the two?
Well, your stock can actually grow out of your flow.
Oh, interesting.
So those little daily updates can spark ideas for bigger projects.
So for someone listening right now, how can they use this concept of stock and flow?
Yeah. Well, take a look back at what you've been sharing recently.
Okay.
Are there any recurring themes or ideas that could be developed into something more substantial?
Like something that could become part of their stock.
Exactly. And Cleon himself says that his books often started as smaller pieces online.
So it's about seeing the potential in those daily updates.
Right. And using them as building blocks.
Okay, so we're sharing our process, we're documenting our work, we're doing daily dispatches. What's the next step?
Well, Cleon makes a strong case for owning your own space online.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means having your own website.
Your own website.
Yeah, because social media platforms come and go.
That's true.
But your website is your own little corner of the internet.
It's more permanent.
Exactly. And you have complete control over it.
So what's the first step in owning your own space online?
Registering a domain name.
A domain name.
Yeah, it's like your digital address.
Okay, and you don't have to build a fancy website right away.
Not at all.
Just get that domain name.
All right. And Cleon even quotes Patti Smith, who says, build a good name and keep it clean.
And your domain name is a big part of that.
Exactly.
Okay, so you have your own website now. How do you make it interesting? How do you connect with other people?
Well, Cleon suggests opening your cabinet of curiosities.
Your cabinet of curiosities? What's that?
It's basically sharing the things that influence you.
Okay.
The books you read, the music, you listen to the art you admire.
So it's like giving people a peek into your world.
Exactly, and it helps them understand who you are.
So what's one thing someone could share today that would open their cabinet of curiosities?
It could be anything, really a favorite song,
Okay.
a thought-provoking article, a piece of art that inspires them.
And what's the key to sharing these things?
Explain why you like them.
Oh, okay, so not just sharing, but also providing context.
Exactly, and always remember to give credit.
Right, credit the creator.
And Cleon uses this great example of Nelson Molina's Trash Museum.
Trash Museum.
Yeah, it's basically a collection of things he's found on his sanitation route in New York City.
Oh, wow.
And it's so fascinating because it reveals so much about his unique perspective.
So it's not just trash, it's curated trash.
Exactly. And your cabinet of curiosities does the same thing for you.
It shows your taste.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're sharing our influences now. What about sharing other people's work?
Well, Cleon is very clear about this. Always give credit.
Always give credit.
Yes, when you share something you found, make sure the original creator is recognized.
And why is that so important?
Well, it's the ethical thing to do.
Okay.
And it also benefits your audience by pointing them to valuable resources.
Right, it gives them more context.
Exactly. And Cleon uses this analogy of a museum label versus a forgery.
Oh, okay.
You know, a museum label tells you who created the artwork, when it was made, where it came from.
Mm.
But a forgery is just a copy with no context.
So it's like stealing someone's work.
Exactly. And proper attribution is like that museum label.
It gives the work meaning. Okay, so we're sharing our work, we're sharing our influences, and we're giving credit where credit is due. How do we make all this sharing more engaging?
Well, Cleon says the key is good storytelling.
Storytelling.
Yeah, because humans connect through stories.
That's true.
So he suggests learning some basic story structures
Well, okay.
to make your sharing more compelling.
So how can someone apply that right now?
Well, think about a recent challenge you faced in your work,
Nope.
or a valuable lesson you learned,
Mm-hmm.
and try framing that experience as a simple story.
With a beginning, middle, and end.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And Cleon quotes John le Carré, who said, "The cat sat on a mat is not a story the cat sat on the dog's mat is."
Oh, I see. So there's conflict there.
Right, it's more interesting.
And that conflict makes it a story.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're telling stories. Now, what about the flip side of sharing? What about dealing with criticism?
Ah, yes, the dreaded criticism.
Because when you put your work out there, you're opening yourself up to feedback, and not all of it is going to be positive.
Right, you got to be ready for the haters.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that?
Well, Kleon dedicates a whole section to learning to take a punch.
Take a punch.
Yeah, because criticism is often part of the process.
So it's about developing resilience.
Exactly. And he shares this story about Mike Montero, who went to art school.
Okay.
And the critiques were brutal.
Oh, wow.
But he says that's what taught him to take a punch.
So it made him stronger.
Right. And Kleon says that learning to handle criticism is crucial for anyone who shares their work publicly.
So what's a good way to approach criticism?
Well, try to separate the feedback from your sense of self
Okay.
and see it as potential fuel for growth.
So don't take it personally.
Right.
And look for the nuggets of truth.
Exactly.
Okay, so you're putting your work out there, you're getting feedback now. How do you connect with other people in a more genuine way?
Well, Kleon warns against becoming human spam.
Human spam.
Yeah, just blasting your message out there without any real engagement.
Right, it's about being authentic.
Exactly. So he says be a fan first. Yeah. Be a connector. Be what writer Blake Butler calls an open node.
An open node.
Someone who's open to new ideas and connections.
Okay, so what's a practical way to do that?
Well, identify one person whose work you genuinely admire.
Okay.
And reach out to them with a thoughtful comment or question.
Without immediately promoting your own work.
That's key.
Right, it's about building a relationship.
Exactly. And Kleon shares this great story about Adrian Young.
Who's that?
He's a musician. And he connected with William Hart.
Okay.
From the Delphonics on Twitter.
Wow.
Just as a fan.
And what happened?
Well, they ended up collaborating.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So you never know where genuine engagement might lead.
That's true. It's all about building those connections.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're connecting with other people. Now, what about the elephant in the room?
What's that?
Selling yourself.
Yeah.
Because a lot of creative people are uncomfortable with that.
It can feel icky.
Right. But Kleon says you shouldn't shy away from asking for support or payment for your work.
When the time is right.
Exactly. So how do you get over that discomfort?
Well, I think it's about recognizing the value of your work.
Okay.
And being able to articulate that value to others.
So it's not about being pushy.
Not at all.
It's about being confident.
Right. And Kleon shares this quote from Ben Shahn.
Who's that?
He was an artist, and he said that the amateur works for love, the professional for love and money.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's about finding a way to sustain your passion.
Make it sustainable.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're selling ourselves. Now, what about the long game?
The long game.
Yeah, because creative work is often a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely.
So how do we stay motivated? How do we keep going?
Well, Kleon's advice is simple. Stick around.
Stick around.
Yeah, don't give up too soon.
Don't be a quitter.
Right, embrace the long-term nature of this work.
So it's about perseverance.
Exactly, and he uses this really vivid analogy from Joan Rivers.
Okay.
She said that show business is like riding a bicycle. If you stop pedaling, you fall down.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
Yeah, so you got to keep moving forward.
Okay, so you're sticking around. You're in it for the long haul now. What?
Well, Kleon also advises us to go away so you can come back.
Go away so you can come back. What does that mean?
It means taking breaks.
Breaks.
Yeah, incorporating sabbaticals into your routine.
So like vacations?
Sort of, but it's more about intentionally stepping away from your work
Okay.
to recharge and gain new perspectives.
So even small breaks can be helpful.
Absolutely. And Kleon talks about Stefan Sagmeister.
Who's he?
He's a designer, and he takes a full year off every 7 years.
Whole year.
Yeah. But even if you can't do that,
Right.
just taking a few days or even a few hours can make a difference.
So it's about giving yourself time to breathe.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. What's Kleon's final piece of advice?
Well, he says, when in doubt, begin again.
Begin again.
Yeah, don't be afraid to change direction.
All right.
Or to learn something entirely new.
So it's about embracing that beginner's mindset.
Exactly. And Kleon reminds us of this thought from Elaine de Botton, who said that we should be much less embarrassed by who we were last year.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's about growth.
Right.
And sometimes growth means starting over.
Absolutely. So show your work is about so much more than just promoting yourself online.
It really is.
It's about shifting your entire mindset around your creative life.
It's about recognizing the value of your process.
And the power of sharing.
And the importance of putting yourself out there.
So for someone listening right now, what's the one thing they can take away from this book?
I think it's that sharing your work is a journey.
Not a destination.
Exactly. So start small, be consistent, and most importantly, be yourself.
Be authentically you. And on that note, we're going to wrap things up here, but we'd love to hear from you.
Yes. What resonated with you?
What are you going to show?
Yeah. What's your first step?
Let us know.
And until next time, happy creating.
Happy creating.